Okay, we're good.
All good? Okay, thanks,
Yes.
Jolene. Call this meeting of the August 25th Planning Commission to order. The first order of business is adoption of the agenda. So, or before we get going, I'll let the board members introduce yourself. My name's Jeff Roberts. I'm chair of the Planning Commission, and I'll be chair for this hearing. All questions and comments that should be directed through the chair. And I will start as normal, working across the screen, the Zoom screen here, with let each board member and those of staff introduce themselves. So I'll start with Larry.
Larry Bowen, public member.
And moving on to Florian.
Florian Youngen, public member.
And moving on to Doug.
Doug Wright, public member.
Okay, and Joanna.
Joanna McCallum, town councillor.
Okay, and okay, Lisa's not on, so we'll have Lisa introduce herself if she gets the electronics worked out. From a town staff, town administration, we'll start with top left corner for me, Jolene.
Jolene Noel, recording secretary.
Great. And Katie, welcome.
Thank you. So Katie, I'm shadowing Jolene.
Great, thanks, Katie. Moving on to Lauren. I see you're on here.
Lauren Miller, Manager of Planning and Development for the Town of Canmore.
Great. And Jane, I see you're on here as well.
Jane Dean, Permit Clerk and Meeting Administrator.
Great, thanks, Jane. And Nathan.
Nathan Gravel, Development Planner.
Man, that beard keeps getting longer every time I see that, man. Okay. Jolene, are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda that you provided us?
There are none.
There are none. Okay. I move that the commission adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor, a show of hands on your screen there. That's all in favor. Okay, great, thank you. Lisa, I see you're connected now. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Lisa Jackson. I'm a public member of CPC.
Great,
Sorry for my computer.
No problems. Thank you, Lisa. So we do have previous minutes which went out from our last meeting on July 28th. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes of those minutes that the folks had noticed? If none, I move the commission approve the minutes of the July 28th, 2021 meeting. All those in favor, show of hands. Okay, that's passed unanimously. Thank you. So for those that are here today, the process for this afternoon will be we'll work through the application that's in front of us. We'll let staff present that application. Then commission will ask questions of clarification from staff. Then at our discretion, we may be asking the applicant to speak to these. There'd be a 5-minute time limit associated with his speaking to this, and commission could ask questions of him. So that's the process we'll follow. I'd like to remind everybody that the town of Canmore has a respectful workplace policy, and we ask everyone to be respectful and honor that policy. So moving on with the application, PL 20200276 for 506 Bow Valley Trail. Take it away, Nathan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Just Give me 1 minute to share my screen here. PowerPoint. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can, or I can anyway.
Okay, I'm seeing some heads nodding. Perfect. Okay, good afternoon, members of the Canmore Planning Commission. My presentation today, as mentioned, is in regards to development permit application PL 2020-0276, an application proposing 9 visitor accommodation units located at 506 Bow Valley Trail. The development is referred to, at least at this point, as the Memory Hotel. We'll start off with a bit of site context. The red box on the screen shows the location of the subject site, which is located along Bow Valley Trail. The site is vacant for a commercial lot. It has a very narrow lot width. Adjacent to the site are a variety of uses and features, such as to the north, visitor accommodation developments, such as Mountain View Inn and Skyline Peaks, which is under development. There's also a public utility lot over on the east side here. To the east, just adjacent to the site, is a commercial development, the Glacier Professional Building and its parking lot. To the west is a single detached dwelling, and to the south is the rail line. Here we see a view of the parcel somewhat, and streetscape looking east along Bow Valley Trail. One thing to note is there's no real pathway on this side of Bow Valley Trail. And just a view of the opposite direction here. Again, you can see I think the most distinct features, there's really no pathway or pedestrian infrastructure on this side. Looking at policy direction, the subject site is within and governed by the Bow Valley Trail Area Redevelopment Plan. The ARP envisioned this site an area for accommodating much of Canmore's capacity to provide accommodation to visitors outside of the resort centers. So essentially, Bow Valley Trail is all things visitor accommodation, so hotels and things that support hotels. The development complies with this and all requirements of the ARP. So what's proposed in terms of uses, as I mentioned, it's visitor accommodation. There's only one use, just visitor accommodation. And this use fits the intent of the BBG ARP and naturally the Bow Valley Trail General Commercial District as well. So what's it look like? In terms of form, the building is 3.5 stories. The architecture is traditional mountain architecture, makes good use of stone, heavy timber, balconies and colors, as you can see on the, by the pictures up on the slide. With regards to site layout, there's one building. There's a pedestrian pathway that connects each unit to the street here. Surface parking for vehicles accommodated mostly through garages, landscaping, and a small plaza. There's one vehicle entrance from Bow Valley Trail, indicated by the black arrow, and there's one main pedestrian entrance from the Bow Valley Trail indicated by the red arrow. The development enhances and interfaces well with the street through the use of a street-facing plaza, quality landscaping, and balconies. It should be noted that the developer will be constructing a pathway along the front of the development, as you can see on the slide, which will hook into, it'll run along the next lot and then connect to the crosswalk at the corner of Kananaskis Way and Bow Valley Trail. So it'll be nice to have a little bit of pedestrian pathway development on that side of Bow Valley Trail. The application requires 4 variances to the land use bylaw. These include maximum building eave-line height, minimum landscaping area, minimum facade step back above the eave line, and minimum setback for a projection. Looking more closely at the first variance to maximum eave-line height, the district restricts the maximum eave-line height to 7 meters. The building's proposed eave-line height is 8.81 meters. However, and as the commission will recall, as this came up with Skyline Peaks, the district allows for the development authority to relax this amount to 9 meters, where it's satisfied that the intent of the massing and scale guidelines outlined in the community architectural and urban standards, design standards are met. Planning believes the design of the building satisfies these standards and therefore supports the variance. For example, to break up the perceived mast, as you can see on the slide, the building makes good use of articulation, including stepping the building down as it proceeds to the rear of the site, the use of balconies, and material and color variation. The next variance is to the requirement for a development to landscape a minimum of 25% of the site. The development provides 23.17% landscaping, so it's a bit short, approximately 1.8%. Planning supports the variance as the developer is providing 14 trees and 53 shrubs, when only 12 trees and 12 shrubs are required. Small scale plaza pedestrian area facing Bow Valley Trail with seating, bicycle parking, trees and shrubs. At-grade patios with an overhead pergola for each unit. And overall, the landscaping plan is felt to be of high quality and purposeful. It sort of created a green corridor, if you will, from the future pathway all the way down to the last unit. So it's a good use of landscaping. It was well thought out. We go on to the next variance. The district requires that the floor area above the eave line be incorporated into the roof structure and step back from the front building face for a minimum of 70% of the elevation. That's a bit of a mouthful, but basically the area of the building here within the red circle is supposed to step back from the facade below 70%. This helps to break up the facade and increase sunlight and view opportunities from the street. The development's floor area above the eave line steps back 39% of the area of the elevation, so requires variance. Planning supports this variance as the site has its own vehicular access instead of a shared access with the neighboring parcel. So this area here, this reduces a lot of the potential building that could be constructed if it had a shared access. The width of the building itself is small for a typical commercial building. And finally, the deck up here steps back 4.3 meters from the front facade. And while the regulation doesn't specify a specific depth for stepping back, it's reasonable to infer that 4.3 meters is beyond what would be required. So all these pieces help to bring light and views to the street and so forth. So we feel like the intent is being met with what's being proposed. And finally, the district restricts building projections, cantilevers, decks in commercial and industrial districts to eaves and only up to 1 meter into any side yard or any yard setback. The pergola structure, specifically the area within the red circle here, projects 1.48 meters into the 3 meter side yard setback, so it requires a variance. Planning supports the variance as the projection has very little impact on the adjacent property, as it has lots of breaks and openings. It doesn't really add to the mass of the building. Furthermore, there's really no development immediately adjacent. As you recall from earlier, there's a parking lot between this building and the Glacier Professional Building. And finally, it enhances the overall appearance of the building and it creates a bit of a view shed for pedestrians traveling on Bow Valley trails. It kind of steps down with the building. To really sum it up, it'll look nice. Does the application exceed the bylaw? Yes, this application exceeds the bylaw. The project will achieve a minimum of 10% better than NECB requirements. And as mentioned, the developer will be providing 2 extra trees and 41 extra shrubs. The applicant's sustainability screening report indicates a score of approximately 5, suggesting a slightly positive impact on the community. A notice of application was posted on the site for 10 days. No objections from the public to the proposed variances were received. Jumping around, sorry, it keeps jumping around on me there. Given alignment with the BBT ARP, the quality of the development's architecture and the variances, and that the variances are supportable, planning recommends that the Canmore Planning Commission approve PL 2020-0276. Should the commission decide to approve the development, conditions of approval have been prepared. These may be altered at the discretion of the commission. However, it's recommended that the commission not revise the standard conditions section of the document, as these standards are generally in response to direction from council approved policies, guidelines, and so forth. This concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions the commission has.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. I'll work across my screen here. Larry, could I ask you to start the questioning process?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a few points, and you answered one of them. No public response. There's no garbage or loading dock issues, Nathan, here on development requirements.
So there's a waste room within the side within the building. The site has enough space to allow for a vehicle to turn around within, so they can service their waste.
And there's no need for a loading dock?
No.
I have two comments, and maybe I'm looking for some more thoughts from the other members. Is I look at the height as a variance, and I see that it's considerably higher, or the building would be considerably higher, I believe, than Glacier development beside it. And also, if we were to start from A&W and move towards Calgary, all of the projects have a relatively low height, and then this building would be far higher than anything that exists currently. I'd like to hear a comment on the other members to see if they see that this is a concern for them. And also the 9 parking stalls for the 25 beds, but that does meet the requirement of the site. Correct?
So if I could just jump in on with regards to the height. So the land use bylaw does ask for new development to be raised up as close as possible to the crown of the road. And the intention there is, currently the road is much higher and it causes a lot of challenges with pathways that are dipping down and not really allowing for really good interface with commercial space with the sidewalk. So it's the long-term plan. It's looking at 50, 60 years to eventually get all the buildings up to the same grade, but that's the time it's going to take. And this is, development that's ready to redevelop, or this is a site that's ready for redevelopment. And so we want to make sure that it's set to the proper elevation to meet those goals, even if it's going to be a little while before you see any of the other parcels nearby redeveloped and raised to the same height.
Thank you, Nathan. And the parking meets requirements, correct?
It does. There's 9 units, so the land use bylaw requires a minimum of 9 parking stalls. It's a permitted use, so there's no real, the commission can't really ask for more parking because it is a permitted use. If it was a discretionary use, then I think you could get into that a little bit and say, based on its location and type, you'd like to see a little bit more parking. But given it's a permitted use and they've met the parking requirements, I don't know if there's much there to discuss, and there's not really any authority to change anything, I guess.
Thanks, Nathan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Florian, you're next on as I go down the screen here.
Okay, I have some questions about the parking as well, and I was wondering if Mr. Gravel could give us an explanation from traffic engineering point of view why the land use bylaw requires, I think it's a minimum and a maximum of 1 parking stall per 3-bedroom unit. Just from a layperson's perspective, it seems like a small amount of parking, but maybe there's an explanation that would help us understand that policy.
In terms of the required parking per unit, visitor accommodation unit.
Yeah.
I think the intent is really that so I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with how the calculation was derived to require 1 parking stall only. I know in terms of maximum parking, the town is really trying to control the amount of surface parking with new developments to encourage people to bike to sites. Obviously, if you're coming from out of town, you're not biking there, but guests and or visitors, visiting people staying at the hotel, those sorts of things. So those are the rules that are in place in the land use bylaw. As I said, there's really no flexibility there because it's a permitted use and they're meeting those requirements to require more. That's all I can really provide in terms of background on that topic.
It looks like Ms. Miller wanted to, yeah.
So what was that, Florian?
It looks like Mrs. Miller wanted to get in on that.
Okay. Lauren, did you want to?
Just to further answer the question that was posed, part of the rationale behind the direction that the new land use bylaw has taken with regard to parking stalls is, as Nathan mentioned, to advance the town's goals with regard to active modes of transportation and encouraging more walking, biking to and from destinations. So I know that this, when it comes to visitor accommodation units or other multi-unit developments, there has been a concern about there not being enough parking. And so part of the flux that we're in right now is we're trying to change people's behaviors and get them to a place where they're using active modes of transportation. So there's going to be a bit of maybe an uncomfortable period where their new developments have less parking, but it's ultimately to really encourage that mode shift to active modes of transportation. So yes, it's probably less than what most people would think is enough, but it's probably more than enough if people are using active modes of transportation.
Okay. Any follow-up to that, Florian?
Yeah, I would. There's a couple of things I'd like to follow up on the parking. And I appreciate, the integrated transportation plan. There's a lot of thought behind this. I guess from my perspective, and again, just as a layperson, it's difficult to understand why a 3-bedroom tourist accommodation unit requires 1 parking stall and the equivalent dwelling requires 2. I think it's more likely that a permanent resident of town has alternate modes of transportation rather than someone who's visiting. I think it's quite reasonable that there could be 3 vehicles using 1 unit if there's 3 bedrooms, a tourist accommodation unit. But that's just a comment. Like I realize the bylaw is what it is. So I guess that's just a comment there. So to follow up on the parking, there are 9 parking stalls, but the garbage pickup uses one of the parking stalls to make the maneuver to leave the site. So there's adequate parking, but if the parking's full, then garbage pickup doesn't work. Am I correct about that?
No, there should still be adequate. So 1 parking stall is, if I go to the site plan here, just so it's easier to see. So you've got 8 garage stalls.
Mm-hmm.
So they really only need one additional stall. And so that stall is here. This isn't meant as a parking stall. It's a no parking area. So if you're a guest, you would park here. If you're a truck, you come in, you turn in, you back out like that. So so they're able to meet their minimum stall requirements and turn around a vehicle at the same time.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I think the plan we had in our package looked a little bit different with that deeper stall reserved for snow storage. Okay, but that explains that. So, you know, again, just following up and out of curiosity, in theory, if all these parking stalls were in use, where is the nearest place for overflow public parking? Like, it looks like there might be 2 stalls right in front on Bow Valley Trail.
So currently you can see there's lots of parking along the street here. On other sides, they're not really designated as parking, but people are obviously using them as parking stalls. This will likely go away in the future as the town upgrades these areas with their streetscape, the desired streetscape design. But for now, these are available, and obviously on Kananaskis Way, there'd be some parking as well.
Okay, given that parking is not really negotiable, I'll leave that, and I'll just make a comment maybe in response to previous members' questions about height. In my opinion, the variances are all quite minor and don't really have a negative impact on any of the neighboring properties. So to me, in my view, the variances are quite acceptable, and I would agree with the staff recommendation on that topic.
Okay, thank you, Florian. Moving on to Doug.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Florian on that one on the height. It was a concern at the start, but it falls within the guidelines we're allowed to for the variance on a height within the land use bylaw. And obviously the senior staff planners and council would have discussed that when they created the ARP. So we can't change that. So I have no real concerns with that. The rest of the variances are definitely supportable. Just one question for Nathan, though. Can you go back to why a loading stall is not required?
Just the scale of the development, and there's no services. So typically we see a loading stall for a hotel or a commercial development. So if you're a retail store, you're getting constant shipments of things. If you're eating establishment, you're getting groceries developed or dropped off all the time, etc.
All right. Okay. No, that's good, Nathan. I'm not apologize for cutting off, but you've answered my question. But the question then becomes, we had a very similar application with 10 units last month, and there was a loading stall required, and we had to give a variance. Why? Is there such a difference?
That's a great question. I'm not familiar with that development.
It was a 10 unit. This is 9.
Could have just been in the. Let me just bring up the land use bylaw for a second.
No, it states it for commercial development.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I respond to that question, please?
Certainly.
Mr. Wright, I would just have you consider that the previous application that CPC considered was in a different land use district. And so the requirements are not necessarily the same from one district to the next.
That's a fair answer, Lauren. However, having read the land use bylaw, it does not restrict it by district. It's for any commercial development. But we'll leave that. We'll go past it. It isn't a variance, but I just wanted to ask the question and raise it. The only other point I would make, and as everybody here knows, we went through a long discussion on a 10 unit visitor accommodation last month. Had this application been in that location, we'd be going through the same discussions. It's only because it's in a different land use district. But I support the variances. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Doug.
Sorry, if I could just respond to Mr. Wright's question there. So looking at the land use bylaw, it says a minimum of 1 loading stall shall be required per multi-unit residential building or non-residential building unless it can be otherwise demonstrated to the development authority that loading can reasonably take place without a dedicated stall on site. So we don't believe that, given the scale, there's no amenities, there's no spa, there's no really nothing here. They don't really need a dedicated stall on site.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Joanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions, most of my questions have been answered, but I did have one question with regards to nearby transportation options. So can you tell me where the nearest bus stop is, either for local or regional service, Mr. Gravel?
Oh, put me on the spot. It's been a while since I've been on the bus. Last I remember, it was near Shops of Canmore.
Yep.
Okay, I think there's one a little bit closer. That would be a regional bus, but a local bus I think is maybe within 2 blocks. But I guess, yes, for a regional bus, that would be correct. I'm just trying to see if I can find it myself. Sorry. If you want to move on to the next person, Mr. Chair, while I find this.
Sure, we can come back to you, Joanna.
Yeah,
Lisa.
that's the only question I had.
Yep.
Thank you. Actually, all of my questions have been covered already. It's the benefits of going later, but thank you. No other questions.
Okay. I think I've caught everybody with the exception of myself. So let me sort of build on. I support this this application. One of the things that is really coming to the forefront in a couple of the more recent applications that we've had is when we use the definition of a unit, and the unit will have up to 3 double bedrooms in it, with which could accommodate 6 people. And it's not very often you have visitors coming that have a 6-passenger vehicle that with the room for bikes for everybody, or paddle boards or kayaks and that sort of thing. So one of the challenges, and it's been brought up previously, is that if you're a permanent resident here, you need more parking stalls. And if you're coming from elsewhere with, say, 6 people, you're likely taking more than one vehicle to arrive here. And if you're bringing bicycles and kayaks, public transportation really isn't available for that sort of thing. And some of these developments that we've got, they're coming forward as deemed as visitor accommodation when they're very similar, and I'm having a real tough time understanding the difference between visitor accommodation and a tourist home. In my mind, visitor accommodation is something like a hotel or a suite hotel or that sort of thing, which has an office or a place to check in, and this does have an office and a check-in piece. However, if you go back to the previous application that we looked at last month, which is visitor accommodation, one of the issues that came up with from when going out for comment from the local individuals who are impacted was lack of an office. So I'm having a real tough time going month to month, understanding the difference of how staff is identifying visitor accommodation versus tourist home, when a tourist home when some of the visitor accommodations is very similar to residential accommodation. So, you know, I think that one of the things we need to do is help to alleviate some of the issues and risks around parking is really look at how we define a unit, and put some tighter definitions around that. So that's I'll open myself up to response here from whoever wants to take that. Nathan or Lauren?
Yeah, Lauren's got her hand up.
Oh, I can't. So I've got.
Sorry, I was muted. I can start if Lauren wants to add anything.
Sure, Nathan, go ahead.
So I was just going to touch on the difference between residential, tourist home, and visitor accommodation units. Residential unit is a unit that you can live in full time. These are the types of units you see in your residential neighborhoods, Cougar Creek, Peaks of Grassy, and so forth. And you live in it full time, it's your home, but you're not renting it out for short-term stays. You can obviously rent it out for long-term stays to somebody else, but it's somebody's home essentially. Visitor accommodation is a place that people stay who aren't from the community. And there's a limitation on how long you can stay, so up to 30 days. This is where our visitors stay. This can take a variety of forms. It can take the form of a traditional hotel, a big chain hotel that's got the big lobby and check-in desk, and it's got all the services, room service and a spa and so forth. Or it can be devoid of services like a Skyline Peaks. Skyline Peaks doesn't offer anything in terms of services. It's just the room to stay in. So there's a variety of forms that this can take. We do see the market lately preferring the Skyline Peaks model where there's not a lot of services. And so it does start to look kind of like a residential hotel or apartment building or a townhouse or what have you, because it doesn't have that that commercial component that you would see with hotels, where you see the big entrance with the eating establishment and the lobby and so forth. When you walk down Banff Ave, you see that. You see a very distinct presence on the street. So that's visitor comm. It can take a variety of forms, but essentially it's a place where visitors stay and they can't stay for any longer than 30 days. In between that is tourist homes, which is considered a residential use because somebody can live in it full-time as their home, but they also have the option of renting it out for short-term stays. So it's kind of like a hybrid of the two, but fundamentally it's residential and somebody could live in it full-time. And so when we review a tourist home, we have to look at it as a residential unit. And so we're looking for on-site amenities that would related to, you know, someone who lives there full-time. There's a balcony, there's places for people to go to chat and recreate on site. So that's the difference between the three. I think that the change here, as I mentioned, is with visitor accommodation, you're seeing a little bit of a different product. You're seeing a form that's very similar to, in some ways, to residential, but ultimately the use is what matters most, and they're restricted, anyone who stays there, in terms of how long they can occupy the unit, so 30 days. As long as it's visitors who are staying there, it's really meeting the intent of our objectives for Bow Valley Trail and the town center. That's what we want, is we want places for people from out of town to come and stay. It may be not the same as what we're used to in terms of look, it's not the big hotels or chains, but fundamentally it's serving the same purpose. In terms of parking, yeah, there is, it's a little bit different maybe than the chain hotels that really offer a single room for, you know, 2-3 people or one family. And I guess we'll see how that goes and adjust as needed. But that's what's in the land use bylaw currently, 1 stall per unit.
Yeah, and I guess my point is that a unit could be 3 bedrooms with up to 6 people or possibly more if there's children involved. and that the one parking stall doesn't necessarily accommodate that when we don't, as a community, we don't have built out transportation that gets folks from Calgary Airport or from Calgary proper to the town in an efficient manner, or certainly manners that aren't used. So having said that, this is a conversation which is good to have, but it's really not going to impact this development application. I don't think, given what's in front of us. So Joanna, we were going to circle back to you. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank
Lauren,
you. No. Oh, sorry.
Lauren, you had your hand up next, though.
Yes, I just wanted to recommend and advise the commission that we need to be mindful that the visitor accommodation, hotel, tourism sector is definitely going through a bit of a transition. And we're starting to see visitor accommodation models that we are not used to seeing. We're not used to seeing hotels that don't have a front desk, that don't have a number of amenities, that are simply providing the accommodation. So I would encourage the commission, we do have the applicant here, rather than maybe speculating as to what we think or how we think this might operate, that the commission use this opportunity to question the applicant about how they envision this model operating and what implications it could have for parking, access to regional transportation, et cetera. Just because this is an evolving market, I just want to ensure that commission is using the opportunities it has to get the information it needs to make a mindful decision and not just kind of speculating on what we think it could happen when we have the people here to tell us exactly what their vision is.
Okay, and before we do that, I was going to just circle back to Joanna.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So yes, I went online and there looks to be the closest regional stop is at the shops of Canmore, which is I think about maybe 150 meters away, 200 meters away. And then there's a local bus stop about like across the street. So I want to say 50 meters away. So it's fairly close, 50 to 100, just to be safe, not being able to measure it myself. So that's how I answered my own question. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Joanna. So at this point, thanks Lauren for that suggestion to reach out to the applicant. I'm not sure who wishes to speak to the intent of the development, whether that would be Rob or Ben. So we'll allow you to speak to the intent of the intended use of the development that you've got on site there. And you're both on mute. I'm not sure, Rob or Ben, who's going to take this.
Oh, Ben, can you hear me? Can you guys all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Rob.
Do you want to, Ben, take the question about the intent of the development? I can speak to a lot of other things, but I think Lauren is asking about how or the use because of the changing visitor accommodation. Is that correct, Lauren?
That would be correct. The dilemma that we have, I think, is that many of the visitor accommodations that we have now resemble in form and internal amenities to a residential accommodation. And although the intended use is restricted to 30 days, they look and taste and feel like you would get in a residential accommodation. So it's versus what many of us would think of as a 2 or 3 day weekend type of place.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it does look like a residential accommodation, but it operates like a hotel. As you could, in our case, in Ben's case here, we have 3-bedroom units, but it could very easily be a family with 2 kids, which is 4 people and 1 van and a bike, or 3 bikes, and an ample space to store the bike. So I don't, I'm the designer, the project lead. I don't know how the market is going to go forward. It seems to me like the folks at Base Camp across the street designed the same concept as this, right? So I don't know, Ben, can you add to how you see it operating, say 2 years from now?
Mostly, I totally agree with what you just said, and like use those units for the short-term rental. And when I first came to Canmore, I was impressed by the charming scenery and the friendly people here. So I hope to build a visitor competition building to attract more people to visit here. And just like Rob said, for the mini one, it will bring 1 family, 2 adults, and 2 kids to here. And the bedroom on the 3rd floor, which is also a bedroom, but there is the patio outside, so it will easily to convert it as a party area. So the unit, I think, is perfect for 2 adults, 2 kids, or 2 adults, 3 kids, or some single person to come here to enjoy the Canmore. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ben, and thanks, Rob. I'll just open to questions, and I see Joanna's got her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if the applicant could speak to how they would manage, since parking seems to be a discussion, how they will manage overflow parking within the site itself. So when you take reservations, will you be informing reservers that there's only 1 parking stall that they have access to? Will you be letting the market decide as to who stays here, as opposed to there being public overflow issues?
Well, obviously the renter has to be informed that there's only 1 parking stall. They can't park in the lane. They can't park on the site with an additional car. It's impossible. So I would assume they would guide them to, if there are 2 vehicles per unit, guide them to a public parking area. That would be the obvious answer.
And where would that public parking area be?
Well, when Nathan showed you Bow Valley Trail, right now, today, there's quite a bit of parking, street parking on either side of Bow Valley Trail. That may change down the road. I'm not sure, but that would be the first spot for sure.
Would there be any consideration? Sorry, can I ask a third question, Mr. Chair?
Oh, sure.
Perfect. Thank you. Would there be any consideration in ensuring that the applicant knows that there isn't, like that? I guess we talk about the market deciding, right? Let the market decide, which is sort of what you're building. You're building this, you've let the market decide. If you want to ensure that parking doesn't overflow, you need to make sure that the people that are booking these accommodations understand that there's no promise of overflow parking. And so I'm not sure if just letting things spill over onto public land is necessarily the answer to your market question.
Well, yeah, I guess that assumes they have additional vehicles, of course.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think when Ben is operating this, he has to tell the guests there is only 1 parking stall, period. Because they can't, there's other issues if they park, for example, in front of the garage, that there's fire issues. It's going to have to be a rule. And I can't, well, I'll suggest something that maybe Ben has thought of already. You'd have to have a larger map to show other parking areas, potential parking areas, for a guest who may have two vehicles. Say, here's,
Mhm.
you know, the additional spots you can park.
Okay, thank you. I do want to say it's a very attractive building. I think that you've done a really great job. I love the articulation, and I think it will be, if approved, it will be a well sought after accommodation. So thank you for designing something beautiful.
Thank you.
And that's a great segue, Joanna, into intercept parking and the need for it in that general location. Because I don't like the market deciding to park and block my vehicle in my driveway, which has happened in the past. Anyway, okay. Any other questions from commission? No hands up, I see. Okay. Okay, thanks very much for that discussion and the feedback there, Rob and Ben. And my other observation, I think I made it before, is that you do have an office facility on site for folks to check in and check out with, and manage any noise issues that may crop up through the weekend or through the evening. So on-site management, I think, is important. So I think we've had a fruitful discussion here. I'm prepared to make a motion that the commission approve this development. So I'll just go around, and if there's any additional comments that you may make, that commission members may have prior to voting on this. I'll start with moving to the right, Florian.
Yeah, so just to summarize my thoughts, I think the variances, as the staff report suggests, are quite minor. They don't have a negative effect on neighbors at all. And so I'm quite happy to support this proposal. I would like to comment on the parking, just to kind of flog a dead horse, but I think we don't really have much to say about the parking because the land use bylaw is so prescriptive. It says there's a minimum and a maximum of one parking stall per visitor accommodation unit. But just as a member of the community and member of the commission here, I guess I think it's our role to bring up concerns from the community members. And I guess this is directed at staff that are present. I do find it a little bit confusing that something like bed and breakfast unit requires 1.5 parking stalls, I believe. Townhouses have different parking requirements based on the number of bedrooms. So to me, it's a little bit hard to understand why a 3-bedroom visitor accommodation unit is so prescriptive in only requiring one parking stall. So I guess that's just a comment directed at administration and staff, just to kind of express a concern that I feel as a community member. Having said that, I don't think parking is an issue that we really have a say on in this application. I think the variances that are being proposed are not an issue, and so I will support.
Great, thanks. I'll move down to you, Larry.
No, Mr. Chairman, I have no issues with the application. I think the variances are minor, and I would certainly support the application.
Okay. Moving over to Joanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would be happy to support this application. As I stated before, I actually do believe it's a beautifully designed building. The variances are clear to understand why and are site specific in my mind, and have been addressed through the design. What else do I have here? It's within close distance walking to downtown. It's near transit. I think that it will be a popular building when built. I understand parking is a discussion, but that not only is embedded in with how we are dealing with our integrated transportation master plan, but it is also part of our climate change discussions as a community and trying to move that forward. And then there's always the market. So, you know, if I looked at a house that and I had lots of cars, maybe that's not the house for me to buy. Just like a hotel room, if I have more than one vehicle, maybe that's not the hotel room for me to rent, or maybe that's not the community for me to go. So we can't really ignore how the market responds and how we want the market to respond based on our goals as a community. But I'm happy to approve this.
Great. Great perspective. Thanks, Joanna. Doug?
Well, I agree. I support the application. I think the variances are minor. I do also support Florian's comments regarding the parking issue. This is the second time in 2 months we've had a concern with the amount of units and the amount of spaces available for parking. I think it's part of what we discussed for the letter that our chairman's drafting for council, and I think it's one that needs to be addressed in that letter. To have it looked at to get some consistency across the board for the number of bedroom units, I think is maybe what we have to look at. But I do support the application. It's a very nice looking building.
Great, thanks, Doug. Lisa, on to you.
Yeah, I also wanted to second Florian's comments there and Doug's comments as well around the parking, but within the context of what we're looking at here with the application, I had no hesitation in approving that with the variances as is. And I think it's a great use for that lot that I've been looking at for a long time. So
great. Okay, thanks, Lisa. So we do have a motion. If I show a hand, so support for to approve this development with the conditions as listed. And I think we had all hands there. So motion carried with all in favor. Okay, thank you. Other planning business. Yes, we do have one outstanding item from the previous minutes, and that was alluded to by Doug there. I am drafting a letter of to council regarding transition, the definition around transition on the properties between 10th Street and Mallard Alley. I've continued to do some research on there. I'll get that right or get that out to folks shortly. And included in that is parking with respect to differences between a 3-bedroom residential unit and a 3-bedroom visitor accommodation unit that looks very similar, with the exception of that it's tagged with visitor accommodation, and the differences and and what we're asking neighborhoods to do with respect to the limited number there. But that's a work in progress right now, and I'll get that draft out to all the commission members to take a look at before we deliberate that further at a future meeting. Any other planning business? If none, Jolene, we've got a meeting scheduled for September 29th.
So we do have it scheduled, but we just had confirmation today that there's no application for the board. So the next scheduled one would be October 27th at 2 p.m.
Okay.
Katie sent the email out earlier today, canceling the September one.
Okay,
That's right.
great. I hadn't checked on that. I'll have to look at my travel schedule. I'm actually out of country from September 27th for a month, for 27 days or something like that. Hopefully I'm back by the 27th, but I'll be letting you know.
That's exciting.
Well, it's, you know, I'm going to Germany to visit, to see my first grandchild who's supposed to be born in 10 days. So,
like I said, that's exciting.
That's exciting. It's also depressing in a way. No, I shouldn't say that. It's it's exciting. So if nothing more, I'd move to adjourn the August 25th Planning Commission. It's what time do we have? 3 o'clock here. So all those in favor? Okay, carried. Thank you for your, there it goes. Thank you for your participation.